Hello out there. This is Stacey Sanderson, therapist, author, consultant, and coach regarding complex relational trauma, narcissism, high conflict divorce, and any other kind of suspicious toxic behavior that may be influencing you or people you know or love. And often when I come in to make a YouTube video, I have spent some time researching the concept. So, really offering something that is scientifically grounded. I am not doing this today. Where I'm coming from today is based on a theme that emerged when I was working with clients, which is my favorite way of creating content. So you're not going to hear any of the details or particulars, but more of the theme. And then I will back up the patterns mentioned in that theme with some psychology. These videos are intended to do a few things. First and foremost, I want to provide information that is timely, relevant, evidence-based, but more importantly, based on real conversations with people's real lived experiences. So, where perhaps an AI-based research is going to give you information, I am giving you that in addition to people's lived experiences and in my own clinical take on and response to that. And so it's my intention that this gives you insight, but that you also take what resonates with you and leave the rest. These videos also serve, I hope, as a way for you to get a sense of what it would be like to work with me, whether that be as a therapist here in Ontario or as a coach and consultant everywhere outside of Ontario. And to know that I work with people in a way that is meant to be relevant, meaningful, timely, and that you leave with at least one session with a clear idea or a clear map of what needs to happen next, or you decide to come in and join me in transforming pain to power, which is where we can integrate trauma-based work, attachment-based EMDR, if that's appropriate for you. But if you need to know more about that, just set up a call with me or send me an email. And on to this theme that emerged last week. So sometimes sitting in my office with clients, or in this case, working virtually with clients, it there are these similarities in the client stories. And the theme is around how that toxic person in their life is behaving. And so I started listening to this fairly intently and wanted to characterize the behavior I was hearing about. And what I came up with is maneuvering. I don't think this is new. I'm sure other people have said it, but I think it's an important thing to know about in specific situations. And there could be many of them. But what do we mean by maneuvering? I see maneuvering as a planned or methodical way of doing something to have a particular outcome. I could have looked up the definition, but for our purposes for this discussion, this is what I'm referring to. I don't think it's obvious if you've got someone in your life who's highly narcissistic or even borderline, because they do it too, um, it's much more subtle, and you may be so used to it that you don't even notice it's going on. But to keep this as simple as I can, I think where this comes up is if the narcissist doesn't want to do something, could be any number of things. If they don't want to celebrate you, if they don't want to attend something where they're not the center of attention, if they will feel vulnerable in a situation, for example, they will do what they need to do in order to not attend. Now, I wrote a blog post and I forgot to put this in there, but one of the things I've heard them do is kind of create or manufacture reasons why people don't like them, right? They play the victim and then they avoid attending something like a party with the in-laws. Okay. I do that too, but I call it boundaries for my personal peace. It's a slightly different thing. Um, they, I've talked about this before too. I find narcissists to be incredibly avoidant, socially avoidant sometimes. They avoid novel situations. They don't like committing to something where they don't know what to expect, but mostly they don't like committing to something where it's not 100% about them and they're not the center of attention. But back to the maneuvering. The maneuvering comes often in the form of withholding, stonewalling, silent treatment, or silence as a response. So if you fire out an email or a Facebook message or a text to them and there isn't something there that sounds of interest to them, they may not answer you, or they may give you the runaround, right? Or they may triangulate a third person in to see what they want to do. I've seen that happen as well. So that's the maneuvering around avoiding or maneuvering around getting their way. So I use this example in my blog post. If you invite them for lunch at a Japanese restaurant and they don't get back to you and they don't get back to you and they dance around and they make excuses, and then you figure out they don't like sushi, so you offer to go to the Mexican place and they get right on board. That's another example of that maneuvering. So it's withholding, it's manipulating the situation in order that so that they get their own way. Now, this maneuvering can be a little bit more sophisticated than this, in that if you have a narcissistic parent of particularly adult children, but even younger children, one form of maneuvering is around keeping the golden child in their place of preference. So this would be where the maneuver is, the narcissistic parent doesn't attend a meaningful event for one child but will reserve that attention for the other child and make sure that they attend. I will say this is the one I've experienced the most personally, where, certain types of presence and participation are withheld, but given freely to someone else. And even just last week, I watched that play out. So this lack of reciprocity is a form of maneuvering. Lack of fairness is a form of maneuvering. It keeps the narcissistic person really feeling like they're in power and control. It's a bit Machiavellian, if you will. But this can happen in the workplace where, and I've had this happen too, meetings are scheduled and planned and you don't know about them. Projects are initiated and you may not know about them. Um, I could just keep going. I think withholding, however, is the most common form of maneuvering. But whatever it is this, I kind of like now you see me, now you don't, whack-a-mole. It was like just combine guacamole and whack-a-mole. Kind of funny. But you will see that happen in some of your interactions. And there's a story playing out there about what they really want and how they really feel about you. And one thing I feel compelled to mention is that um, this can really make you feel off balance. And I think it's intended to do that, right? It's making you feel less than. It allows for the narcissistic person to look like their life is more important. I think we all know that narcissists, especially the female ones, love to make it look like they have a busy social calendar schedule. So they'll look and see like, where do I have a spot to fill? And then they'll manipulate until that's the time when you meet or gather. And I've seen this happen many, many times. I've heard of this happening many times. And this also ramps up during a devaluation and dismissal phase. So if you follow my work, you've heard me talk about this. If there is some form of narcissistic collapse or something going on in the relationship, or you have stood up for yourself and asserted a boundary, some of this withholding, silence, stonewalling can be an early indicator of that phase of reinventing the narrative to make you the bad guy so that they can exit the relationship. Maybe not necessarily in that order, but that's another example of that. And the last thing I'm going to mention is the maneuvering that happens if, heaven forbid, you are in a court proceeding with someone who's highly narcissistic. This is men and women. There's no gender discrepancy. But the thing I most commonly hear is the narcissistic partner not sharing or submitting their required documentation to keep the process moving. And this also happens in mediation, not just in court. So anything that is asked of them, even from an officer of the court, they will push and avoid and not submit. I think there are all kinds of interesting reasons why, for example, like here in Canada, someone might not submit their tax information because it might be revealing, but that's another common tactic. And what's going on there is they're trying to maintain that power positioning, right? They're trying to continue to treat you the same way they did when you were married. So that's what's going on with that maneuvering, but they will then at the 11th hour maybe submit what they need, but then ask you for something. And they will often make an unreasonable demand, have a motion filed, do all kinds of things just before you're supposed to have the kids if you're in a rotating custody situation. But these are all maneuvers. And at its very worst, right? At its very worst, or worst, at its very worst, this is designed to knock you off balance, potentially to hurt you, and to keep you engaged in that negative energetic exchange, right? They think that it's going to drop you down to their level. And so there's not much you can do about this. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but you can track the pattern and be prepared. Notice when it's happening and find ways to respond that are confident and don't pull you into that old toxic dynamic. So you could call this gray rock. I call this compassionate detachment in my work. But those energetic boundaries are really important. And what I mean by that is recognize when someone's trying to suck you into some type of conflict and don't engage. They don't like that, and it can escalate. And I don't think giving silence back in return is particularly helpful, but you want to give neutral answers. If this is a court situation, right? Or if this is a custodial, if you're separated, divorced, this is also where you want the communication to be in an app, right? In one of those co-parenting apps, for example, or through email only, just as a boundary, or if it's particularly bad, through a third party. It's important to keep yourself grounded in your own reality and what you know to be true, and to recognize this particular behavior, this maneuver, if you will, for what it is, right? So you think about the maneuvers that the army uses, right? It is tactical, sometimes it's skilled, and it's designed to keep the enemy off balance. I know nothing about military, but gave it my best shot. And the same is happening for you. So if you have questions, if this has happened to you, if you've got comments, subscribe. If you know someone who could benefit from this message, please share it. I know what I love to do with my fellow YouTube content creators is share their work everywhere I can. And at times sharing that with all of you. And if you specifically would like to have a chat about what's going on in your own life, there is a booking link in the comment section below. So again, take what resonates, leave the rest. Um, Tomorrow evening, that would be July 14th. If you catch this in time at 7 o'clock, I'll be live on Zoom doing a cord cutting ritual, a beautiful guided meditation on the new moon to release what isn't serving us and plant the seeds of healthier boundaries and intentions. So you can find all of that and register for that. It's free on my website. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.